about to hear is Bigfoot, like you've never heard before. William Sheehan is a writer, therapist, Christian blogger. He's an avid archer, marksman, fisherman, and he has compiled numerous accounts and testimonies of witnesses to Bigfoot in North America. And these encounters that he documents, again, not your typical Bigfoot encounters. These tend to be, let's say, chilling, frightening, sometimes violent. He is the author of 11 volumes, 10 and counting. I think he's working on his 12th. Bigfoot Terror in the Woods, and BigfootTerrorinthewoods.com if you'd like to find out more. William Sheehan. Bill, welcome back to Strange Planet. How are you?
El gusto es mío. The pleasure is mine.
You just sent me a sketch before the show. This is a fantastic, very detailed sketch. I'm going to put it up on the. We're going to insert that on the for those of you watching on Rumble, and you can see this for yourself. I mean, it looks it's super real. I mean, it's photograph quality. The sketch of a giant Sasquatch head staring right at us. Where did you get this?
In the course of the many interviews that I do, I was contacted by a fellow named Jeff. I'll leave his last name out, as I always do. And he was a guide for 30 years in a guide ranch and school that used to be located on the back of Pikes Peak in Colorado. And I spent 6 hours interviewing this guy, getting all the details of the various numerous Bigfoot encounters he and others in the guide school and ranch had. This sketch came from one of those encounters that he actually had when he was solo hunting. And he had a couple of paid fares that was supposed to show up for a week with him, but their father died and they called up to cancel. And he had a personal tag to fill. And he asked the foreman if it was okay if he spent, a few days by himself trying to fill his elk tag. So he wound up going out into this valley behind Pikes. Now, mind you, these guys had access to 2 million acres of private land and 3 million acres of public land.
Wow.
That was theirs to hunt on. And he went out, pitched a tent in this little valley, if you will, and his plan was to go up to a rock ledge where he could overlook this valley with his binoculars and see if he could find something suitable. So he had made his way out, and he had to walk by 3 different beaver ponds to get to this ledge. When he got up there, he's hearing bugling going on here and there, and his eyes are drawn to something in the beaver pond, the first beaver pond that he had walked by. And when he sets his binoculars on this thing, which he believes is a large elk, and he thinks he's looking at it from the rear, bent over, eating in this pond, it stands up. And then it turns around, and it was looking directly at him. So he puts the glasses on it, and that sketch, he's at 100 yards with 10 by 50 German binoculars, which is like me looking at you 15 feet away from me. I mean, I could see the hairs on your face. I know what color your eyes are. I know if you got good teeth or fangs. And that sketch was done by a friend of his who has, like, obviously forensic artist capabilities after the fact. But this creature, he said, was looking directly at me as though it could see through the 2 lenses on my binoculars. It came out of the pond, started walking towards where his tent was, squatted down, and he thought it was actually, doing a bowel movement.
Mm-hmm.
Got up, and he was wondering what's going to happen next, because all he has is a bow and arrow. And now he's got this monster standing between him and his escape route. Well, the creature moved and in a favorable direction for him to make his exit, which he did hastily. He left his tent, all his gear there, and hiked back out. Now, it was a 6-hour hike to get where he was.
Wow.
And he said he got out in 4. That's how fast he was hoofing it.
So,
Go ahead.
did he have any vitals on this Sasquatch? How tall it was, and the girth?
Well,
and so forth?
it's hard to say. It's hard to say, at 100 yards. But he said it was one big mother. And the musculature, he said, was just off the charts. Now, this is a guy that has had a couple of Bigfoot encounters. And this one was really up close and personal. And when you're alone, it makes it a little bit more hair-raising.
Was it making any sort of menacing expressions or movements towards him?
Nothing other than a stare down.
Mm.
And I had told him that I believe the creature knew you walked by it in the first place. You didn't see it. And it probably was watching you all the way up to where you made your way up onto this ledge to look over the valley, and had just turned once again to look at you. And of course it was looking directly at you because it knew you were there.
Mm-hmm.
I said to him, it was watching you the whole time. That's my opinion, Now, could it have attacked him? Sure, these things can turn south in a hurry. But in this particular situation, he walked away, and so did the Bigfoot. It's interesting.
Yeah, it was submerged in the water beside one of these beaver dams. Would you speculate it was maybe looking for a dinner, and it was going to go into the beaver dam, maybe? And
well, I learn a lot of stuff from the people I talk to. And one thing I learned recently, and I'm surprised nobody had cued me in on it before, was that these beavers build these huts or houses, whatever you want to call them, on these rivers, and they go in there to hibernate.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that. I thought they just lived inside of there all year.
Me too.
But a friend of mine up in British Columbia told me that the trappers go after them in the wintertime because they know that they're in there and they can get them.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never heard that before, and if anybody knows anything more about these things, I'd love to hear the information. I love to be more informed about what it is we're looking at and talking about,
So,
I think to answer your question, yeah. I think he might have been in there, perhaps eating some vegetation on the bottom of the water, which a lot of the moose do, elk do. Mm-hmm. All kinds of critters eat vegetation. And who knows, maybe he was scoping out these beaver ponds for some of the little guys, Right.
The other thing that I take away from this story is that Bigfoot have incredible eyesight. If he's having to look at it through his binoculars, high-powered binoculars, obviously the Bigfoot is looking at him through the naked eye. They've got great eyesight.
Yeah, well, the potential is there, but we're talking about 100 yards. Mm-hmm. So, like, if I'm looking at you at the other end of a football field, just to look you over, just to have eyes on you, I mean, I can see you.
Right.
I'm not looking at details. I don't know if you've shaved or not from 100 yards. But Jeff had the advantage of the 10 by 50 Zeiss binoculars. Mm-hmm. So that brought the Bigfoot into view from his perspective very close. Whereas whether or not the Bigfoot had great eyesight or not, it was, in fact, looking at him up on this ledge from about 100 yards away.
Yeah. So you have people reaching out to you from all over the United States, I'm guessing, to tell you about their Bigfoot encounters. What percentage of them are hunters?
Oh, I don't know the percentage, but it goes like this: hunters, hikers, fishermen. Three people that are the majority of those who are seeing or encountering a Bigfoot or finding evidence of a Bigfoot. And then the rest are very much, not that they're not random, but the rest are people like you or like me that are just going about some daily business and run into one. Completely inadvertently. Very few people are actually out looking for a Bigfoot and find them or any evidence of them.
Any
Now,
evidence?
go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. You go ahead.
No,
Bill.
I was going to say, I recently penned another encounter out of Colorado that was pretty intense. And I invite you to enter into what happened to this guy because he is, when I say a real mountain biker, the term mountain bike came from guys who were taking these, mongoose bikes and whatnot, and actually taking them into this rugged terrain and rat racing around and jumping off rocks and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. So hence the term mountain biking. People who mountain bike around me are going down dirt trails in the Pine Barrens. They're not in the mountains of Colorado. He was on a regularly used trail by mountain bikers. And on one occasion, he saw some color in the dirt. He stopped and he found a helmet. So he stopped to look at the helmet. And when he picked it up, the helmet appeared to have dried blood inside of it. So he thought to himself, some guy probably crashed, ass over tea kettle, cracked his head open, left the helmet there and got away. Well, later he finds a bicycle. Now, the bicycle, he told me, had been out there for a long time because the chain was rusted, but he knew that the bicycle was like a $2,500 rig. This was not some cheap run-of-the-mill kid's bike, And he had thought to himself, was there any relationship between the helmet he had previously found and now this bicycle being left behind? And he thought to himself, even if somebody crashed, and I don't care if you broke your leg, cracked your head, would you or would you not have come back or had one of your friends or buddies come back for your bike?
Exactly, yeah.
It just didn't seem right that it would be left there to decay. So he is in the same area. And the helmet that he wears on his mountain bike is the same one that he wears when he's riding his road bike. And it's one of these helmets with a little mirror coming out the side like a dental mirror.
Right.
That when you're down in the crouch and you're pedaling, you could see the cars coming up, behind you. So you're in your safe zone. He's coming down this trail on his mountain bike, and a flash comes into his side mirror, and it's a freaking Sasquatch stepping out from behind him, looking at his mirror, in other words, at his back.
Right.
And it's starting to come towards him.
Wow.
So this guy gets on the pedals, like you can't imagine, like you or I would do, and just starts going for his life. And nothing happened. Like it either stalled, went back, gave up the pursuit if it was going to be in full-blown pursuit, but no harm came to him, and he didn't see anything else of it. But if you think about it, it's very much like a mountain lion or a cougar would attack somebody out there, and they do get attacked. In fact, somebody was telling me months ago that mountain bikers in these areas now are doing what they do over in Asia, whereas the men in Asia, when they're hiking through the jungle, they wear a mask of a human face on the back of the last guy's head in the line.
Right.
Because he's going to be the one that's going to get hit. And they know that from experience, unfortunately. So I was told that a lot of mountain bikers are wearing a face. There's a face on the back of their helmet now because they do get attacked by lions periodically.
Wow. And Sasquatch, apparently.
And now it makes you, and it made him think twice about this bloodied helmet and the bicycle being left. Who owned this helmet? Who owned the bicycle?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have answers to these questions, but it's kind of strange, isn't it?
Meals on wheels.
Very good, Richard. As long as the meal isn't me.
You got that right. Um, are hunters? Do you hear from hunters that because they have a weapon, as opposed to a hiker or a fisherman, the presence of a weapon, does that at all change the equation in terms of the type of encounter they have? Does it antagonize Bigfoot?
Well, if you'd like, I can bring you into the world of a another sighting encounter, actually 3 encounters that all occurred in Georgia. And my newfound friend Neil, and I make a lot of friends in this business, Richard. I meet some really quality people. And this fellow's name is Neil. I won't tell you the county that he lives in because there's only 538 people living there, I think he told me. And if I told you, probably a lot of people would know exactly who I'm talking about. Neil, without giving you the entire backstory, Neil is in peanut and cotton farming. He has substantial holdings as far as land goes, and he also has some properties that were left to him or in his care when his stepfather passed away. Neil rents or leases out these pieces of land as hunt clubs. Mm-hmm. So his arrangement is this, that if you are in a lease agreement with him, you are allowed to hunt deer and turkey in season. You are not allowed to hunt dove. He reserves the dove for himself. And you are allowed to come to these properties any time of the year, day or night, to crack off feral hogs. You could just shoot them till you run out of shells or you fall asleep on your feet. And the only thing he asks is that when you shoot the hogs in the field, you have to drag them out to the borders, because he said, if you run over bones of anything in the field with the tractors, they could put a hole right through the tractor tires.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah.
And he told me that the buzzards and the possums and all the other critters will eat whatever you drag out. So eventually things are consumed. So here's what happened. When his stepdad died initially, he had become friends with some of these people who were coming there to hunt. They had like an old farmhouse that they kind of renovated to become a lodge. There was room for a lot of people in there to bed down, to eat. And this one fellow had called him, wondering if he had a piece of land that he could still come up and work on, as an individual. So Neil said, he told the fella, I got a couple of 100 acres over by my house that I'll let you hunt on for nothing. If you'd like to come up and check it out. So he did. Now, as I get into this with you, I want you to understand something. Neil hadn't at that time, nor has he ever seen or encountered a Bigfoot himself. This guy arrives, and Neil is taking him down to this 200 acres to show it to him. Now, Neil told me this place was spooky, Bill. And it consisted of some woods, marshland. He said it just gave him the creeps. So he's bringing this kid down there to look at it. Now they're sitting there in the pickup truck, and Neil, for whatever reason, says, if you were going to see a Bigfoot, you'd see it right here. Now, I told you, Neil never saw a Bigfoot. The guy turns and looks at him and he says, "Do you believe in Bigfoot, Neil?" And he says, "Well, based on some shows I've seen and things I've heard," he said, "Yeah, I think there's people telling the truth out there and this thing exists." And he says, "Well, I encountered a Bigfoot, Neil, and it was on your land."
Whoa.
So he commences to tell Neil what happened. Him and his buddy had driven into his acreage, and it was at night. They were going to shoot hogs. Both of the guys had a 308 AR-15 package with them. One was sporting a night vision scope, and the other one was sporting infrared. So they were cracking out some hogs, leaning on the hood of this pickup truck, catching them out in the field. And this one hog came out that Neil said he told him was about 300 pounds. They took a shot at it, and it walked away. Now, the rules are you leave nothing in the field. So they had to go after this thing to find out, it didn't drop dead. They had to find it and make sure it wasn't in the field, So his partner is following the blood trail with the infrared. The blood shows up hot, and they follow it into the trees. Now, Neil told me these trees down there are a certain type of pine that they make the telephone poles out of. They grow straight and true, and the woods is very much open in there. You're not walking into brush and bramble. Like in daytime, you could see in.
Right.
They walked into the edge of this wood, picked up the scope, looking through it. Here is this fat pig sitting on its haunches, squealing in the trees.
In the trees.
In the trees, sitting on its haunches.
Right.
His friend turns the infrared to the right and sees a large glowing mass. And as soon as this happens, the mass leaps from where it was to behind the pig and tears the freaking pig's head off right in front of them.
Wow.
He told Neil, we turned and we ran as fast as our booties could take us. Now, when Neil asked him, "You two guys had 308s. Why didn't you shoot it?" Like, to answer your question about hunters and guns. He said, "I was personally so freaked out by the speed at which this thing had moved and what it did to that hog in literally a split second, that there was no way I was even going to attempt to shoot or fire, because who knows who would have won in that duel." So later on, Neil meets up with a fellow farmer who owned a big parcel of land that adjoined his. Neil hadn't told him about what happened. And on this day, he was with his wife in the pickup truck, and this guy came up alongside of them out in the field to say hello. And he decides to break the ice and tell him about what happened. So this guy says to him, "Well, I guess that explains Rodney's thing." So Neil gets into this conversation with, what the hell is Rodney's thing? Well, he apparently had a farmhand who lived on a house on the farm. And the joke amongst the workers was Rodney talking about the screaming he was hearing all the time by his house and at night. And the joke was, "Oh, that's Rodney's thing." They called it his thing. Well, it goes on. This other guy in an adjoining county gets wind of these happenings, and he decides to break out with what happened on his farm. one of his workers, they were setting up to plant a field. And Neil sent me pictures of the tractor setup that they use after explaining it to me. And these tractors have these hydraulic arms that come out of the side and they drop down with like some type of furrowing wheels on them or something to cut these grooves.
Right.
And this guy had come from one field through the woods into the other field to begin laying out this field, while the other guys were setting up the seed and everything, waiting for him to be completed. He got into the field, saw a Bigfoot standing in the field next to the woods as he was working, was so freaked out by it that he put the tractor into high gear, whatever that would be, never bothered lifting up the hydraulic arms, and tore them off the tractor going back through the woods.